Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are excited to have you all today. Today, we are wrapping up our series that we've been doing over the course of April, Financial Literacy Month, to build awareness about financial literacy, how to build wealth for your kids, right? And then now, what we're going to talk about is how to protect that wealth. So, we've discussed the foundation, we've discussed how you could invest your money using the stock market. We've talked about getting life insurance and how that can be an avenue for you to build wealth, right? We've also talked about you using real estate, right, and entrepreneurship to build wealth. And so, in essence, we're talking about raising up wealthy kids, right? And so, in keeping with our newest book, A Toolkit for Raising Wealthy Kids, where we go through all of what we've been doing in more depth. Right. And so today I'm really excited to have Attorney Gerdes here with us today. She is so passionate about sharing knowledge about asset protection. And so I am just really admirable of what she does and how she does it because she's so involved in the community. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring her up to tell us a little bit about herself. Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, welcome again. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into asset protection.
Well, I've been doing this now for about 23 years.
Mm.
And I went to University of Minnesota Law School.
Mm-hmm.
And I had intended to actually go to New York and got an offer. But during law school, my mother passed away from cancer, and my grandmother had to go into a nursing home. And in a short amount of time, she lost all her assets. And watching that play out was, I couldn't understand how that could happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of taking the offer for the New York law firm, I decided that, I want to find out how to prevent people from losing their assets.
Mm-hmm.
For my grandmother, it's long-term care cost. Some people lose it to lawsuits or creditors.
Mm-hmm.
And, for estate planning, it's probate, estate taxes, and other things, a number of different kinds of, I call them predators.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming out of law school, I got my training and opened my law firm 5 years later. And that's all I've been doing for the past 20 years with my own law firm. And yeah, that's how I got into being the foremost asset protection specialist nationwide.
Yes, nationwide. Yes, you do have. I saw that you had your offices all over the nation. So, many people who are watching may not know when you say asset protection, right? Or protection of assets, and you say, oh, they lost their asset, and you watch that play out. What does that mean? Like, can you explain a little bit? What does that entail? Asset protection?
Well, it's such a generic, ambiguous, and everybody uses it just generally, but doesn't understand really what that involves.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a different definition and version based on whatever their self need is.
Right.
So when most people think of asset protection, they just think about, protection from lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
That's one component of it, but there's many, many other reasons that people want their assets protected. Again, it can range from creditors and lawsuits, but it can also range from protection from divorces,
Mm-hmm.
remarriages, children being disinherited,
Mm-hmm.
probate court, long-term care cost,
Mm-hmm.
Medicaid, sometimes your own family, frankly.
Yes.
So it's a lot of different reasons that people think about protecting their assets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about protecting it from lawsuits.
Right, right. So one of the things that we've been doing over the series of weeks, we've been kind of telling parents how to build wealth, right? And so a lot of people are, when I talk to others, they'll say, yes, I'm investing and I'm doing this. And I go, but how are you protecting it? And so can you talk about how can parents, let's say we're building our wealth for our kids, right? We're doing the necessary things that we need to do. We get the IRA, we're investing, we're doing all these different investments, diversifying the portfolio. But then we all know that at some point we're going to pass, but nobody knows when. So how can we use an asset protection, what you've done and what you're doing, right? How can we, after we build the wealth for our kids, how can we protect it, right?
Yeah, and you do such a great job in helping people, accumulate their wealth,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to put a fence around it. What's the
Yes.
point of doing all of that if you don't put a protective fence around it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell parents with children, first and foremost, what's going to happen if something happens to you two?
Right.
People just get a will not understanding that there's no protection for the children. A will, designates that you want the assets to go to spouse and children, but it has nothing to do with who's going to protect and manage those assets for your children.
Mm-hmm.
When you name a guardian in a will, that's who has physical custody. It has nothing to do with who's going to manage and protect those assets.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do more than a will, the probate court takes over until the children are 18.
Mm-hmm.
And they take their fees out every single year and everybody else that comes in. Or predators start coming out because you didn't plan to protect the assets for the children.
Mm-hmm.
And equally worse is giving the children, which the law requires, when they turn 18, everything lump sum.
Mm-hmm.
No guidance, no protection, no education, nothing.
Nothing. Right.
So at the very least, we tell parents when they start having children or buying their first home to get a trust in addition to your will.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Mm-hmm.
make sure that your children are protected in the event something happens to the parents. And by the way, it happens. People think, oh, it's never going to happen. But by the way, it does. Children end up in foster care. Children end up with relatives that you would never want them to be with because you didn't do the necessary planning sufficiently.
Right.
To make sure that your children are protected and the right people are around your children, taking care of them and the children.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember you told us the story. So just so everyone knows, the way I know Holly, she's my attorney. She's getting us right. And so you told us a story about the volcano. A couple went out. Can you share a little bit with our viewers that story?
Yeah, and they were, of course, referred by financial advisor, and they had a lot of assets, and they also had a lot of assets that they had invested with other relatives, aunts and uncles. Sometimes they're on the name, sometimes they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going on a trip to New Zealand. Their relatives were going to watch the kids. And I said, at least at the very least, before you leave here, get the will executed. We definitely have to do the trust. Oh, well, no, we'll get around to it. Well, when we come back, we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
We're too busy, packing and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, what can you say?
Mm-hmm.
And, when the volcano erupted, the husband died pretty much immediately, being burned, and the wife, died in the hospital from the burns. And the children, the relatives were fighting over who has custody because of the amount of assets that the children were going to inherit. Mm-hmm. But also all the relatives were fighting to get the assets because some of them invested in it, in those assets. Mm-hmm. And it's a complete mess. And the children will be very lucky if they have anything when they turn 18.
Wow.
And, we had an attorney, we share stories with each other. Mm-hmm. And the parents got murdered. Oh my goodness. And the uncle was in probate court petitioning to have custody of the children. And again, significant amount of assets. And the police had suspected that the uncle's the one that murdered him.
Oh my goodness.
And the guardian ad litem that was appointed in the probate court for the children, they heard that. But they couldn't do anything because there was no evidence. And there was nobody surrounding the children protecting them. None of the assets were protected. Parents didn't do a trust. And the uncle got custody.
Oh my goodness.
For the purpose of getting the money.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
that's an extreme circumstance, but the point is you got to make sure that you get the right documents in place, making sure that the right people are going to take care of your kids and that the assets will be protected.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. We have goals that we're trying to accomplish in life. We're high achievers. We're trying to have this amount of money in the bank, and we're trying to make sure kids are set when they get to a certain age, but we're never prepared. I'm a Christian. And so you don't know when the maker is going to take you. You don't know when you fulfill your purpose. And so if you don't have a plan in place, like you said, probate court will decide what happens to your kids, right? And so, one thing that a lot of people that I've interacted with, they say, okay, I'll get a will. Now, what I want us to kind of talk about is the disadvantage, right, of the will, because a lot of people will say the will is sufficient. I can just get a will and that's fine. But can you speak a little bit on the disadvantages that comes with getting a will only?
Well, a will has to be probated first and foremost, so you're not avoiding probate.
So when you say probate, I'm sorry, let's say we are not familiar with what is probated when you say probated.
Probate is the government court system when somebody dies or becomes incompetent or there are minor children involved when the parents pass away. They take over the assets and they decide what's going to happen. The probate court, that is not your family, doesn't care. They just follow the rules, the law. And when somebody dies, the will has to be probated. And it takes about 1 to 2 years to get through on average, if there's nobody contesting anything. Average expense can range from 5 to 20% of the value of the assets. And we have to notify everybody in the universe, are you owed any money out of this estate? Come get it.
Wow.
And for minor children, like I just said, the assets get turned over until they're 18. So not a good situation.
Right.
Probate court is backed up full of people that don't do their planning or not sufficiently, or they think that the will does everything. They just can't fathom, hey, I put in here who's going to get my assets. And why would probate court get involved? Well, because you're in the United States. That's the law.
Yeah.
A will has to be probated.
Wow.
So I don't care. People ask me 1,000 times over and over. It's like, listen, you want to believe what you want to believe. Go on Google, put it in, and you'll get 1,000 more things of what you want to believe. That does not mean it's accurate. Does not mean it's true.
Yes.
And you can't be listening to friends and families that think that they know it all. People that think they know it all don't know anything. And they do really detrimental, devastating impact on people that would have made a different decision if they just knew what the truth was.
Yeah.
And actually go talk to an expert. Now, mind you, going to an attorney doesn't guarantee you're going to get the right advice. You got to get an attorney that actually specializes in this. I have many attorneys that are my clients. They don't specialize in this. So they may not know. They may say, do a will. Why do you need a trust? Because they don't know any better either. CPAs, financial advisors, it doesn't matter. If this is not what you do every day and all day, they don't know either.
This is true. Yeah. Everybody's an expert in something, right? We don't know everything. And I am the very first to say, I don't know when I don't know something. And I know before Nadine was the one who introduced me to you, but, we were going to just do a will. But then we thought a will is not going to allow us to build a legacy for our kids. Right.
Absolutely
and so
correct.
Take me into the next question. Right. So if we want to set up a legacy, because that's one of the themes of the book, long-term wealth, right? And setting up a legacy for not just your kids, but for your generations, right? How can the trust help to do that?
Well, if you set, and there are different types of trust, but if you
Exactly.
set up the right trust that continues after your death for the
Mm-hmm.
life of your children and grandchildren and great grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
you have the option in Georgia to have your trust last 350 years.
Wow.
Can you imagine what type of legacy, wealth building that you can do? But you have to do the right type of trust that will insulate and protect your assets in the event your bloodline, meaning your children and descendants, don't lose your assets due to their divorces and lawsuits and
Mm,
creditors and disability. You
right.
gotta insulate it from all of those outside things that can wipe out your assets each
Mm-hmm.
generation.
Mm,
And also avoiding probate every generation,
mm-hmm.
avoiding estate tax every generation.
Mm,
And that's how wealth building and legacy planning is done. It's
yes.
not by just a will, it's not by just doing a basic trust.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have the right protection to protect your assets for at least 350 years,
Wow.
if
Three.
that's your goal.
Yeah.
And whenever you do a trust, or I should say, whatever decision you make when it comes to estate planning has an impact indefinitely,
Mm-hmm.
positively or negatively.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell people take it seriously. The
Yes.
decisions you make when you do this can have a positive impact indefinitely.
Definitely. Wow. Wow. I made a joke the other day. I said to my friends, I said, if I knew what I was putting in the book, or if my parents knew, I would be so wealthy, right? And then I would be set up. My kids would be good too, right? Because we would have generational wealth prepared for them.
Yep.
I was speaking to one of my students, and he was very intellectual. He said, somebody has to start. Somebody has to be that person in their family to start, right?
Yep.
And we don't have to start with the big bang, right? But it also goes to us also giving our kids the knowledge and the wisdom, right? So that they, when they do inherit it, because eventually we're all going to go, that they know what to do,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. When parents pass the trust to their children, the children are like, well, now I got to do my trust for my family too.
There we
So
go.
it just grows and grows and grows because they have knowledge of it. But if
Mhm.
nobody does it, each generation just keeps starting over and over and over again.
Yes, yes, yes. So one of the things we pride ourselves on is like telling secrets. um, so if you were to share with anyone who's watching or viewers, is there a secret that may not be available, let's say on Google or something like that, about asset protection and trust that you could share with the viewers? What would it be?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a secret. It's just a matter of whether you meet the right people to get access to the right information.
Mm,
And it's not complicated. It hasn't changed much over the years. But depending on who you're trying to protect your assets from, the information is available.
mm-hmm,
It's just a matter of meeting the right expert. And again, for most people, it's getting the right type of trust
mm-hmm,
and making sure that it's established correctly and maintained correctly.
mm-hmm.
That's the secret.
Yes, the right type of trust. So, can you tell us a little bit on the different types of trust? Maybe a
Sure.
few.
Well, there's the revocable and there's the irrevocable. But
Mm-hmm,
what people don't understand is there's many different types of revocable
mm-hmm,
and there's many different types of irrevocable.
mm-hmm.
The most popular, and I'll just stick with this for the most part, is the revocable trust, where you still control everything. You can do anything with your assets. And frankly, your life doesn't change because of the revocable.
Right.
But your assets are protected to avoid probate. Your assets transfer privately and instantly to your loved ones. Your
Mm-hmm.
children are protected. Your spouse is protected. And it just makes everything. And you can do legacy planning that we just talked about, even with the
Right.
revocable trust.
Right.
But there are some basic ones where people say, you know what, I only want to avoid probate. I don't want my family to incur that trouble, that delay, that cost. That's a basic trust where when the person dies, we take everything out of the trust name and give it to the spouse and children, and the trust ends. We just didn't have to go through probate court. The more advanced revocable, the trust doesn't end. It just continues for the life of both spouses and the children and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren for the reason of protecting the assets generationally. Another trust that's becoming more prominent because more people are becoming aware of it, if you have access to higher level of estate planning lawyer that focuses also on asset protection, is the asset protection trust, protection from lawsuits and creditors while you're alive. But also for elderly parents, you as children have to take care of your parents.
Yes.
And they want to make sure all the assets go to their children and not be lost or depleted by long-term care costs, Medicaid taking it. They'll do that trust to put their assets in there so that if they ever need Medicaid in the future, they'll qualify. And all of their assets won't have to be spent down. It'll be given to the children still at their death. So because of the aging population and the cost of nursing home and home care, a lot of the clients are coming in for their elderly parents to get that trust to primarily put the home and stocks and investments and savings in there to make sure that 100% of that goes to the children.
Okay. Interesting. So you talked about the basic trust, the advanced trust, and now what do you call that third one that you said with the
Well, it's an irrevocable trust, but it's for asset protection related, not to avoid estate tax.
I see. Okay. I remember when I was doing a little bit of research, I came across Rockefeller and how he built his empire to where he was able to pass on wealth to his children, his children's children. I think the wealth is still here. And he's such a genius in how he did it. In fact, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was even the one where the trust even came about, right? And so he was able to find the formula, right, to pass that wealth down to his generation.
Well, it required not giving them everything all at once either.
Yes, exactly.
Because, you don't want them not to work, not to become productive citizens. And so, you can't, for that kind that you're talking about, he believed in hard work ethic. And so he didn't give everything all at once. He wanted the principle to keep growing.
Yes.
And that's how that happened.
So the next question I was going to ask is your general tip. I see one of them would be not to give everything all at once, right? So if we're building a trust, let's say we want to do the legacy building trust, right? What general tips can you give parents when they're saying, hey, I do want to build this legacy. What do I need to really make sure is in the trust?
Well, I mean, some parents will, make sure that, hey, you don't get everything all at once. We're going to split it up on a yearly basis, or every 10 years, you can have so much. They put preconditions. You got to graduate from 4-year college. You got to have a job. You can't do drugs. You can't give this away to other people. You can't be used for your divorce settlement or any of your money problems or tax problems. So, it runs the gambit. It just requires you to sit down with the right attorney and go through all of the different possibilities they recommend and see what fits for you and your family.
Yes. Are you familiar with the show Power? It's a famous show. I think it was produced by 50 Cent. I'm not sure. But in the show, the lead actor, Ghost, he knew he was going to die at some point. He was like, I think he was a drug dealer or something. But what he did was he did a trust. And he said his son had to graduate before he could get any of the money.
Yeah.
And that's the first place where I was introduced to the notion of trust. So in the show, his son was trying to go to the lawyer and say, hey, I need the money now. But it was like, no, you have to graduate first. You have to get a degree, and then you will get access to the money.
Yeah.
So,
And, the trust will fund your education, but
yes.
Go graduate.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Holly. You shared so much. So appreciative of it. At least if our viewers tonight, let's say, they weren't thinking about a will or a trust, I'm hoping that, if they don't buy the book, right, that they'll at least get some information in terms of at least start with the will, right? I know there are tough questions that are asked. You have to really think about the end times and what you want to happen. What do you want to see for your child's future, right?
Yeah.
And then if you want to build a legacy, we are all wanting the better version of ourselves for our kids, right? And so in order to do that, we really have to sit and put plans in place, right? That starts with a trust. Well, you can start with the will, but we do suggest, if possible, to do a trust. So again, Holly, thank you so much. And I will be sure to link your information below so that if anyone else is interested in contacting you, she is also in the book, guys. So if you were to purchase a copy of the book, you will see all of her information, and she's in multiple states. So you will be covered wherever you are. Again, Holly, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Have a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.